I am here. All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. We've made it. We've gotten here, and we are very excited to introduce our keynote speakers today from the New York Botanical Garden. We have Samantha D'Acunto, who is librarian, and Nicole Tarnowsky, assistant director of the Herbarium, who are going to share an overview of our world-renowned library and herbarium collections from the New York Botanical Garden, so just down the state from us. And in their presentation, they're going to cover collection-based programming and outreach, as well as citizen science projects, digitization efforts, and a little bit more. So we're very excited to have them here with us today at SUNYLA. We thought it was a great way to incorporate our idea of seeds and growing and rebirth as our theme for this year. Sorry, my brain is at the end of the week. So we're very excited. So Samantha and Nicole, I will turn it over to you. And if we get questions, I'll be monitoring the chat and can help make sure that those get answered.
Thank you, Carrie. Can everyone hear me okay? Great.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. We're really excited to be here. Seeds to Knowledge is fitting for us to participate in this event. And as a librarian, I'm really honored to be, well, virtually surrounded by my library colleagues. So I'm very happy to be here. So hi, everyone. I am Samantha D'Acunto. I am the reference librarian at the Leicester T. Mertz Library at the New York Botanical Garden. And I'm joined by my colleague, Nicole Tarnowsky, the assistant director of the Herbarium at the New York Botanical Garden. Our presentation today, New York Botanical Garden, engaging the communities through botanical collections and citizen science, is going to provide an overview of our collections and services, a breakdown of our outreach approaches, digitization efforts, and citizen science initiatives. Carrie, I'm not sure if you mentioned this just yet, but I'm happy to take questions during the presentation, because through this presentation, you're going to be receiving a lot of information. So I cannot see you. So please do interrupt me if you have questions about something that I'm speaking about. So to get started, the New York Botanical Garden, for those of you who do not know, is located in the Bronx in New York City. It was founded in 1891 by botanist power couple Elizabeth Knight Britton and Nathaniel Lord Britton. Its mission since its founding has been very simply to advocate for the plant kingdom. One of the ways that we follow through with our mission is through the many educational programs that we have at the garden. So I just wanted to break down a few for you. So the first one is our Bronx Green Up team. Our Bronx Green Up team connects NYBG to community gardens and gardeners throughout the Bronx. They engage this community through workshops, certificate programs, and various trainings. They rely on the collections at the library and the herbarium to support these programs and trainings. Our continuing education classes provide certificate courses in botany, horticulture, botanical illustration, and tons more. These students rely on the library's materials for required readings, research assistance, library instruction, and research projects in both the library and the herbarium. You may be familiar with the Humanities Institute. So the Humanities Institute is an Andrew W. Mellon funded program that can be found in other institutions. But at the New York Botanical Garden, it is hosted within the library, and it supports researchers at different levels, so the undergraduate, graduate, and postdoctoral levels, who are doing research that bridges the humanities and the sciences. So Nicole, my colleague Nicole, is going to speak about our collaborations with the Humanities Institute later in this presentation. Our School of Professional Horticulture is a 2-year graduate studies program for horticulture students. So it uses a mix of blended learning, so in the classroom and on in the gardens on NYBG grounds to train the nation's next wave of horticulturists. So these students are probably our biggest library users, and they rely on our space for comfort and group meetings. They rely on our collections for research assistance and required readings. Our Science Graduate Studies program is a partnership with 6 different universities throughout the tri-state area, and we invite botanical research students to come to NYBG, work closely with our collections, and study side by side with leading experts in the botanical field. We are gearing up for this group. So student explainers and K through 12 campers, they visit us when school is not in session, so mostly the summer months. And we partner with local high schools to employ teenagers to teach younger campers STEM subjects. So these teens are required to develop lessons and activities and different hands-on programming using the collections in both the library and the herbarium. And finally, the Urban Advantage Teachers Program is a series of professional development courses for STEM educators in the New York City and tri-state area to use our collections. They're invited to the garden to use our collections to help them develop lesson plans for future classroom visits, as well as activities and hands-on programming. So we're going to cover citizen science in this presentation, but for those of you unfamiliar with citizen science is very simply, it's simply engaging the public in participation to help advance scientific research. The garden has a lot of citizen science programming. Nicole and I are going to cover a lot of what we do in the library and the herbarium, but I just want you to know that there are many more opportunities at NYBG. So our forest program studies the effects of climate change on our forest systems by capturing the phenology data. Similarly, the Living Collections program does the same, but for specifically the NYBG's living plant collections. So all the plants that you see on the ground are then captured by our citizen scientists. The phenology data is then uploaded to our plant records database. Our New York City EcoFlora project uses the iNaturalist app, which is a free app, a free citizen science app that anyone can use and create projects on. And they use that app to capture the city's flora and how it connects to the organisms around it. So birds, insects, and other things. Then they take that data and connect it to already existing natural history information. The new Manual of Vascular Plants, I would say, is the most intense citizen science project that we have, because it is an effort to revise the original Manual of Vascular Plants written by botanists Gleason and Cronquist. The new revised version is going to capture the morphology, ecology, phenology, geographic distribution, and the conservation status of each of the species. Nicole and I are going to speak more about the library and herbarium's collections, but I do encourage you to check out the website for more information on these programs. So though Nicole and I are here representing the collections at the library and the herbarium, it is important to note that the New York Botanical Garden has many collections, and we all depend on each other, and our audiences use all of these. So again, we're going to speak, Nicole will speak more to the herbarium collections. The library oversees the archival collections, so the institutional archive is home to many of the important institutional records, including information about our founders and botanists, the Britons, as well as other famous botanists that have passed through or collaborated with the New York Botanical Gardens in the past. Our laboratory collections consist of historic and current microscope slides, as well as plant DNA samples. I will speak more in just a moment about our library collections. And our living collections are simply the plants that you see pictured here on the screen, or if you visit, you'll see them on our grounds or in our greenhouses. Like a library, our plants are all cataloged and searchable in a database called Garden Navigator. Our plant records team is a beautiful mixture of horticulturists and librarians cataloging our living collections. So the Leicester T. Mertz Library, this is my area as the reference librarian. And please stop me if you have any questions specifically for me. So the Leicester T. Mertz Library was founded with the garden in 1891. We opened our doors to the public in 1900. As soon as the library's doors opened, we've always supported the garden's mission by collecting, preserving, and promoting works in botany, horticulture, and landscape design. The collection was about 5,000 titles when we first opened our doors, and we are now considered the largest botanical, horticulture, and landscape design library under one roof. So with over 10 centuries of botanical materials represented in our collection, we now hold over 11 million items. And as you all may know, libraries are forever growing, so we're constantly growing. So I mentioned in the previous slide that our collection is 11 million items, but I do want to give you some more granular details. So those of the 11 million items, that's about 500,000 books. And 96 different languages are represented in our collection. Some of the top languages that we collect in are Portuguese, Dutch, and English. These languages are represented overall in our collection, but we do subscribe to over 7,000 e-journals and about 16,000 printed journals. So I would say the languages that we collect in are widely represented in the journals because we carry everything from Martha Stewart Living for, the novice, someone very amateurly interested in gardens, to peer-reviewed scientific journals in mycology and botany for the expert. So these languages are very widely represented in the journal collection. Our library's special collections are probably our broadest category because it captures a lot of the treasures that we hold in the collection. So this grouping, the special collections, consist of things like botanical stamps, botanical art, mounted insects, landscape design plans, seed and nursery catalogs, and really so much more. We are considered a special collection library, and it is unusual for special collection libraries to have circulating collections. But we do have circulating collections that are about 6,000 titles, and it's everything from the history of New York Times bestsellers on climate change and biodiversity, and books about specific plantings and techniques. You're all librarians, mostly librarians or educators on this call, so I don't have to tell you that libraries are very short-staffed. But even though being short-staffed and working with a small team, we do provide a lot of services to a very broad audience. So the herbarium and the library's audience varies slightly, but I did want to break down our audience for you so you have an understanding of who the library serves. So our NYBG staff relies on our collections for their day-to-day work, as well as their ongoing scientific research. We support the 4 student body populations at the garden, which I've mentioned earlier. The public and NYBG members consist of residents in the Bronx, New York City, and the tri-state area. And they use the library for a variety of reasons, browsing, space, meeting up with friends, and the visitors from around the globe who visit the gardens also trickle into the library out of curiosity. We partner up with a lot of local colleges and universities. Some of the institutions that we have strong partnerships with are Fordham University, Lehman College, Bronx Community College, and NYU. These collaborations with the universities and colleges, we primarily support the faculty and instructors on developing class curricula or supporting their students in assignments. And occasionally we do invite them in for tours of special collections. Our researchers are, again, probably the most broadest category because researchers can be anyone. It's a range of ages. We have researchers who are a young student looking for the best science fair project. And then we have researchers who are on the academic end looking to our rare and historic collections to support their research. All are welcome in the library, and we really do miss inviting people back on site. So again, with a small staff, pre-COVID, we managed to provide a lot of programming. So our programming consisted of these categories. Our collection tours were mostly to student and public group tours. Nicole will be covering how the library does exhibitions and open houses, but we do work very closely with the science and education department to do both exhibitions as well as open houses. Like most of you, libraries often offer database workshops, app workshops, Wikipedia editathons, and we also do the same. Most of those programs are geared towards the public or specifically the staff. When we do have interns in the library field, archives, or conservation, we provide on-site hands-on training from our library staff to these interns. The most popular program that we've hosted pre-COVID is the weekly seminars in collaboration with the Humanities Institute and the Science Department. This was a really lively time in the week. It was always hosted on a Friday afternoon in the library, so it was a very vibrant space for communication and discussion. These seminars invited authors and researchers weekly for free to come discuss current research as well as current projects. These are so popular that during the pandemic, they are now available for free online. So you could look more about these programs on our website. And for fun, we do host a variety of craft and wellness activities. We have a series of coloring books from our collections. So we participate in the New York Academy of Medicine's Color Our Collections. And we do ecosystem collage events. So we try to support everyone that comes into the library and really assist them and approach their information needs. But you may be familiar with the research and reference and the interlibrary loan, but the Plant Information Service is pretty unique to our library. So the Plant Information Service is a team of horticulture experts that are stationed or housed in the library, and they use our collections as well as their collective knowledge to support questions from incoming home gardeners, young horticulturists, just curious people in the garden, hikers, and more. Their questions are mostly identification, troubleshooting, how to get started, and one-on-one help with a specific plant. But this is a free service that we offer, and they have hundreds of LibGuides on our website of plant care fact sheets. Reference and research assistance, that most of you are probably familiar with this, but it is everything from searching, helping someone navigate our collections to find materials, bibliographic, and instructional instruction. Though we have 11 million items, it may be hard to believe, but we have a gap. We have gaps in our collection. Every collection does. So we do rely heavily on our worldwide interlibrary loan service to fill those gaps and support our researchers. Being amongst peers, I think it would be silly for us not to acknowledge our network because we do rely on networks. All of us do in all libraries and all academic institutions. So the Metropolitan Library Council is how we at NYBG and New York City get our professional development and kind of use as a sounding board in the library community. Our NYBG staff provides the expertise in the botanical fields to help us develop our collections and assist researchers with those like tricky, hard to answer questions. Our plant information team relies heavily on the services provided by extension services like in Cornell or field stations in Long Island to provide soil samples or fungi and disease identification. So we have good relationships with extension and field stations. I mentioned interlibrary loan partnerships. I can't express how grateful I am for the interlibrary loan system. And then CBHL and EBHL, so the Council on Botanical and Horticulture Libraries, and the European group, the European Botanical and Horticulture Libraries, is our people. They are librarians, and they are more specifically plant librarians. So we use this group, again, as a sounding board to kind of troubleshoot the obstacles and challenges that we face in our very niche special collections.
Samantha, a question came in asking
Sure.
if you put out information on what studies or projects your citizen scientists contribute to.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yep. The question is, do you put out information on what studies or projects that your citizen scientists contribute to?
Yeah, so a lot of the citizen science projects that I listed earlier do get written up in different journals or magazines or sometimes press releases, depending on how popular they are. And you'll see, I'm about to go into some of the library citizen science projects, and you'll see more of how we promote what we do. Is that all right with that person? Great, so I'll move on. I just want to point out the Humanities Institute is now currently focusing on the Food Study Initiative. So the Food Study Initiative is a partnership with the community gardens in the Bronx, and it's a program to celebrate the way food is used in the communities in the Bronx and New York City. This relies heavily on the collections, the specimens collected in the herbarium, as well as the cookbook collection, which is about 5,000 titles in the library. So the Biodiversity Heritage Library is an open access digital library of only collections related to biodiversity. There are contributors from around the world, and the Lou-Esther T. Mertz Library is one of its founding members. Since its founding in 2005, we have contributed over 4 million pages and growing. It's, for those of you with digitization projects, these projects are forever projects. So we're constantly digitizing and uploading onto BHL. Though this is not a true citizen science project, we do consider it as one because we rely heavily on the tagging initiative, tagging the images on BHL from volunteers, as well as volunteer pagination initiatives. So for the person who had that question, the way that our citizen science project is promoted and explained is through the BHL blogs, as well as BHL social media and access points. To search our collections, specifically the Mertz collections in BHL, there's several access points. So you can simply use a keyword search and add "and Mertz," and you'll find our digitized collections on that specific subject. You can use the advanced search option, which allows you to search by title, keyword, or contributor. Or if you're looking to browse all of our digital works, you can simply go to the Contributor tab and click on the New York Botanical Garden Lou-Esther T. Mertz Library. So one of our very true, like a real citizen science project was completed in 2020. We just before the pandemic, we completed our citizen science NEH funded transcription project. So the Torrey transcription project aimed to preserve, digitize, and transcribe the over 350 correspondence by famous botanist John Torrey. This was a remarkable effort on every staff person's part. So the library's conservation team had to preserve and care for every letter, every correspondence, every item in the collection before it was then imaged and uploaded to BHL by our digitization team. Once it was uploaded, we then recruited volunteers to transcribe the letters using From the Page software. This software and this process made these letters available to researchers from anywhere who has computer access. One note about From the Page. From the Page is a really fantastic open source transcription software that is easy to use, and it allows to build community surrounding one project. So this was a really great thing to have because we had such a robust volunteer base and a really energetic project facilitator. Using From the Page software allowed them to communicate freely and have fun with it. So 18th century botany can be a little dry and boring, but our really excited, energetic project facilitator, Richard Jones, managed to make 18th century botany exciting. So he provided weekly newsletters, he gave them vocabulary words, and really so much more. At the end, we had 70 volunteers who actively completed all 350 correspondence. So John Torrey's materials are transcribed and available digitized on BHL. So this is my summary slide for the library. Before I hand it over to Nicole, we did cover quite a bit of information, and thank you for sitting through it. I just want to reiterate that our library is rich with botanical and horticulture materials. We are always happy to help faculty, students, and our peers, libraries like yourself. We will be reopening in mid-July to on-site access. So I really encourage you to reach out for a tour or just if you need any help. Nicole, I'm about to hand it over to you.
Great. Hi, I'm happy to be here. I'm Nicole Tarnowsky, the Assistant Director of the Herbarium. I'll start with an overview of our herbarium and what it is if you've never heard of a herbarium before. We are the largest collection of its kind in the world, in the Western Hemisphere, one of the largest. The Steer Herbarium is a priceless resource for scholars globally who are documenting the Earth's biodiversity of plants and fungi. Our collection represents every major plant and fungi group from all regions of the world, with a particular focus on plants of the Western Hemisphere. We provide access by appointment primarily to scholars and students researching botanical studies such as taxonomy and systematics, genomics, ecology, and climate change. Our specimens provide scientific data to these studies. But we are also a resource for humanities scholars that are part of the Humanities Institute in the library. So in addition to providing scientific data, these specimens and their associated data can also be studied as human artifacts in art and history. So if you have never heard of a herbarium, many people haven't, a herbarium is a collection of plant specimens that have been preserved by pressing and drying them, much the way one would press a flower in a book. Botanists have been preserving plants in this manner for over 400 years. Each specimen consists of the plant itself, as well as a label providing data about it. So each specimen is a voucher representing that species in that place at that time. The Steer Herbarium includes specimens collected as far back as the late 17th century, giving us a record of what has been growing on Earth and how that has changed over time. Our physical collection serves botanists locally and globally. It is central to most aspects of botanical research. We have over 40 researchers and students within our science department. And in a normal non-pandemic year, we get roughly 150 visiting researchers in person each year to consult the collection. We send out approximately 20,000 specimens on loan to researchers at other institutions. And we add approximately 50,000 new specimens each year that have been collected by our own researchers as well as collaborators worldwide. It is important to note that a great strength of a herbarium is that we continue to grow, continue to be a record of the world's biodiversity and how that continues to change. I saw there was a question about seed collections. We do not have a seed bank. We are a collection of preserved specimens primarily to study the physical characters of the specimen. They're not collected as viable seeds for future use.
Nicole, if I could just jump in here.
Yeah.
Our horticulture staff does collect and contribute seeds to the World Seed Bank, but the library and the herbarium do not.
Yeah, so our collection is sort of for a different purpose. We have been digitizing our collections for over 25 years, making this data available online to researchers that can't visit on site or perhaps receive loans. Currently, just over half of our collection is available online, approximately 4 million specimens. So each one of these consists of a high resolution digital image, which, you know, online you can scroll in and see quite a bit of detail of each specimen, which is really useful for researchers trying to identify something. Also part of each of these records is the transcribed label data that has been parsed into searchable database fields, as well as geocoordinates from the locality data on that label so that each specimen can be mapped. So in these 25 years, we have focused on digitizing the strengths of our collection. We're such a large collection, we had to start somewhere, and we figured the best place is to focus on the most useful parts of our collection. So we've done that both by geography and by plant group. And actually we started our very first digitization project over 25 years ago was with our most valuable collection, our type specimens. These are the physical vouchers that are associated with a name when a researcher publishes a brand new species. That particular specimen will forever be the official representative of that species, so you can see why we consider them so valuable. I saw a question about 3D imaging. For the herbarium specimens, they're all pressed and dried, and so they're naturally two-dimensional already, so there's not really much of a point in 3D imaging for them. Historically, our researchers have tended to focus on plants in various regions of the Western Hemisphere. Reflecting these areas of study, we have completely digitized all of our collections from North America, from the Caribbean, and all of Brazil. We have also digitized particular plant families that are specialties of our researchers, including Ericaceae, the blueberry family, the Melastomataceae, which is primarily a tropical plant family, most of the legumes, and all of our fern collections. With new grants, we continue to digitize additional parts of the collection. We're currently looking forward to digitizing our Asian and African collections, all of our the remaining bryophyte and lichen collections that we have, select tree families, as well as the rest of Central and South America. So we have tried to streamline our workflows over the years to make digitizing our collections more efficient. We've tried to automate as many parts of the process as we can. So our current workflow is that we first image every single specimen, and from that image, we transcribe the label data. After that, any specimens that did not already include coordinates in their locality data will spend some extra time georeferencing with whatever locality data was on there. We'll figure out the geocoordinates so that we can map those specimens. We get many grants from NSF as well as private funding sources to do this work. We have paid interns and staff who do this work, but we also rely quite heavily on volunteers to help doing a lot of this transcription. So to that end, we use several crowdsourcing platforms to get help from citizen scientists who will transcribe some of this label data. So the idea is that we'll put these specimen images up online and, basically ask whoever is interested in any part of the world if they're interested in looking at these specimens and transcribing the label data for us.
Nicole, there was a question
sorry,
on, are you using geocoordinates for GIS projects?
We absolutely are, yes. So one thing about our herbarium collections is that, we're a huge collection. For any given species, we could easily have several hundred specimens of a particular species. Each one of those might be a different point on a map. So they're quite useful for various types of research. If you mapped every single specimen of one species, you would start to get an idea of the entire range of a particular species, just as one example of how we would use it in GIS research.
And a second question just came in. What citizen science websites do you find are the best for your projects?
I'm going to tell you about those now.
All right, perfect.
So the one that I have up on the screen now is called Digival. So this is actually a website based in Australia. It's part of Atlas of Living Australia, which is actually really fun for us. So this is a platform used by many different natural history collections all over the world. So, in terms of our projects, it means that people from Australia or any part of the world might be interested in looking at our specimens at NYBG. And the way we do this is we upload small sets of specimens that we call expeditions. So they're sort of grouped to form a narrative to pique a volunteer's interest. You can see in this example, we currently on Digival have one about epiphytes, which are plants that only live on other plants, right? So often up high in the canopy on top of a tree. And we think we've just finished this other one that was ferns of Mexico. Another platform that we use is called Notes from Nature. And again, just like Digival, this is also a platform that many different natural history collections use. Especially within the United States, one of the big funders of digitizing natural history collections in the last 10 years has been a program through a National Science Foundation called Advancing the Digitization of Biological Collections. So for the last 10 years, NSF has been funding basically every natural history collection within the United States to digitize their collections, and in the same manner, put them on these crowdsourcing websites to help us transcribe any information that's associated with the digital images. So Notes from Nature is another one there. So in addition to engaging with citizen scientists, we have always made an effort to share with the public why our work is important. Along with the library, we have always provided in-person tours for school groups, university students, VIPs, and of course, as a nonprofit institution, donors. In recent years, we have increased our public outreach efforts. Even though our physical collections are really only available to researchers, as part of many of these digitization grants that we have gotten over the years, broader impacts are routinely written into them. And so this is a way to include a wider audience that could benefit from having access to our collections. The herbarium is part of a public botanic garden, obviously, with beautiful living collections, beautiful grounds. But for many years, the work our scientists do, and even less so the herbarium, was not something that the public was exposed to when they came to visit our beautiful grounds. So we've really strived to change the way our institution views the herbarium, as well as the natural history community in general. We don't want to be viewed as dusty old dead specimens that the public can't relate to. So, in earlier years, I would argue that our institution oversimplified any presentation of scientific concepts, perhaps believing the public wouldn't be interested or be capable of understanding. So it's been a lengthy process to change these perceptions, even within our own institution. We've spent a lot of time advocating to our exhibitions department the value of including more science throughout the grounds. And this work really has paid off. Exhibitions secured an IMLS grant to present an exhibition in 2017 called "What in the World is a Herbarium?" Which I argue was still a title that had connotations that we were sort of this odd hidden collection. But it really was a successful exhibition, and it was really wonderful, and it really promoted the herbarium and put us much more in the public eye. So along with this exhibition, we stepped up our efforts to reach a wider audience on site at the garden. The herbarium staff started hosting open houses several times a year and worked more closely with marketing to promote them. So obviously our herbarium is usually not open to the public. It's only by appointment only for researchers. So this was a really fun way to actually open up our stacks, pull out lots of specimens, and make it available to the public a few times a year. Print it, plant, the authority source. Okay, maybe that can be interpreted. I'm going to keep going. Not surprisingly, the public loved these open houses to enrich the content. The library also started hosting open houses in conjunction with us, collaborating on different themes for each event. For just one weekend, we would put together displays throughout an entire floor of the herbarium with plant specimens, written captions, supplemental material from the library, as well as mounting and digitization demonstrations. So it turned out the general public does have a huge interest in science and is capable of understanding its concepts. So you can see from some of these layouts here, these open houses have taken huge amounts of time and effort from our staff to research stories, to pull specimens, write captions, and display everything. They really have been a labor of love from our staff. We all work in the herbarium because we love these collections and we want to share why we love them with the public. We routinely come across specimens that excite us with the story that they present. But with all of this work, we really needed a way to preserve it and be able to share it with a wider audience, expanding it to our online users, which is where our CV Star virtual herbarium comes in. So as I mentioned, obviously we've been digitizing our collections since for over 25 years. And by 2018, it was time to update our website design. Up until this point, really the virtual herbarium only catered to the scientific community. You'll notice this aspect of our virtual herbarium is simply a plain looking search page. And even though anyone can access these collections online, to use the search functions, you largely had to know what you were looking for by scientific name. So there was no previous functionality to browse the collection or to understand the value of a herbarium if you didn't already. I saw there was a question about climate control. Yes, our collections are climate controlled, both by temperature and humidity.
There was also a question, I didn't want to interrupt right when in the middle of your thing, but it says, I know that the printed copy of plant patents are the authority source due to the variation that can happen with colors on monitor screens. Wow. Are there any color notations on the digital scans to help researchers?
There are. Every specimen that we take, we include a color card and also a scale, so that those can be calibrated if someone is doing a research project with those particular specimens. Okay, so after much development work on our website, the hand lens was launched in April of 2019 as an additional aspect of our virtual herbarium. We still have our search pages for researchers, but our pages were further developed as a way to present our open house stories to the public. So we can now browse based on general topics without knowing anything about botany. Creating all of these stories from our open houses showed us that specimens can tell so many stories: scientific, historical, cultural. They were obviously made to be vouchers of scientific study, but again, they can also be viewed as artifacts of human history. So we'd like to think they can be relatable as more than just dried dead plants. We can tell stories that everyone can relate to, such as the scent of rain, which is one of the stories displayed here, which explains which plants, lichens, and fungi contribute to a smell that we're all familiar with. We can tell stories related to the season. So here we have A World of Tulips was one of our stories, showing plants that are currently blooming. With our Collected on This Day search. Basically, this is a search of every specimen collected on that particular day. So you could perhaps find a lovely specimen to share with someone for their birthday. So really, with 7.8 million specimens and 300 years of collections, the stories are endless. In each story, there is a space for a title, an author, and a narrative to tell the story. We can display both specimen images as well as supplemental images with captions. And there's also a mapping capability based on the geocoordinates of each specimen, so that you can follow an expedition along points on a map as the plants were collected. Do artists and illustrators use your collection? They absolutely do. There's many artists and illustrators that work closely with scientists, and they for sure are doing scientific illustrations that will be published in researchers' publications. And they're certainly using herbarium specimens to get all of those very fine details. But we've also had other more abstract artists and just people interested in herbarium specimens truly as art. So there's been a lot of interesting uses of herbarium specimens over the years. So as I mentioned, just as these open house stories have been a labor of love, so too have our Handlen stories, which brings us to the multitude of themes in which we can present these stories. And really, there's so much fun that we've had in creating them. This is a perfect question that you asked about art, because sometimes a specimen is just so beautiful. It inspires us to see it as a work of art. One of our main contributors writing some of our stories is Amy Weiss. She's a herbarium staff member. And she's especially inspired and has put together so many stories just based on the visuals of these specimens. Some of these are family friendly, which was, during the pandemic was great content to provide while parents were stuck at home with their children over the pandemic. We also, of course, like to present more scientific stories to the public. Ways that humans have impacted nature is extremely relatable. People are, of course, familiar with cultivated plants, which sometimes become invasive species. So those are interesting themes I think people can engage with. People are also, unfortunately, familiar with extinct species, which we actually have examples of in our collection. We've got specimens that no longer grow on Earth. So after launching the Handlens, we did an open house with the theme of climate change, and it was our first opportunity to create stories to present both in person and at the same time through the Handlens. This model worked really well. We were able to engage with people that came physically to the open house and then direct them to learn more on the Handlens, or talk more with other people that weren't able to come to the open house. We've also been really happy to start collaborating with the Librarian Humanities Institute, which Samantha spoke about previously. Our humanities fellows have incorporated herbarium specimens into their research, studying them more as human artifacts, as I mentioned, along with the incredible sources they discover in the library. The Handlens seem like a great fit to preserve these in-depth research projects. So just before the pandemic, in February of 2020, Humanities fellow Nuala Cuivanach and Mertz librarian Rashad Bell presented a really well-researched project about botany within the Black diaspora for Black History Month. They mounted a small physical exhibition in the library, and in conjunction with the Handlens, we presented this online. These stories became even more poignant after George Floyd's murder and the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, which really made it apparent to everyone that we need to do a better job to be more inclusive and diverse in the science community, as well as acknowledge the colonial nature of our natural history collections. In this past year, another fantastic humanities fellow, Dr. Emily Sessions, did extensive research on, again, as Samantha mentioned, one of our New York Botanical Garden founders, Elizabeth Britton, and the fieldwork that she and her husband, Nathaniel Lord Britton, undertook in the Caribbean throughout their careers. So poor Emily, unfortunately, was a fellow during the pandemic and at a time where the herbarium and library were not physically open. So she really only had limited access to our collections. But as a testament to making these resources available digitally, she was still able to produce an excellent research project. It couldn't, unfortunately, be a physical exhibition in the library, but we could still present it online through the hand lens. Besides fellows, do you have a library internship program? I'll let Samantha answer that one.
Yes, we do have a library internship program, and unfortunately it's unpaid, but we are working with different grants and within the institution to change that.
Great, so I'll just wrap up here. We one last collaboration that we've had a great time getting stories with is our own horticulture department to present stories about our living collections growing on the grounds. So we actually have herbarium specimens of many of these exact plants that grow on the grounds that have been preserved and will be in the herbarium probably long after these trees are not on the grounds anymore. So it's been a really cool way to pair the data from our specimens along with the data and mapping from our plant records department in horticulture and in their database, Garden Navigator. So that's the end of my herbarium section, and it's been a pleasure to share some of the public outreach initiatives with you. I encourage you to check out more online, and I think we're going to put some of the links for those in our chat. We can't hear you, Samantha.
I meant to put the links in the chat, Nicole. Can you do that? I just couldn't do that and share the screen. Sorry.
Yep, I can do that right now.
So thank you all for spending your lunch hour with us. And we just want to do a quick recap. So again, the library and herbarium staff is small but mighty. We are so grateful for our partners and collaborators. Though our audiences differ, we find ways to collaborate when we can, and it's really rewarding to see the outcomes of those projects. We believe outreach is key. It takes a little bit more oomph and a little bit more effort on our end, especially being a small staff, but raising awareness of the collections and helping people understand the importance of the collections is really rewarding in the end. Our citizen science efforts are very important to what we do. They not only engage the public, but they raise awareness of the importance of the collection, the project, and it also helps digitization efforts. We encourage you to take on some of these projects. This was a lot of information in 1 hour, so please feel free to reach out to us personally or to our general email accounts. And like I mentioned earlier, we are always happy to invite you for a tour. So please schedule it with us if you're ever in the Bronx. We have a few more minutes, so if the moderator will allow for a few more questions, we'd be happy to answer.
Absolutely, I'm just checking the chat, and right now it looks like just a lot of kudos and thank yous. I'm not seeing any questions come through right now. Thank you both so much. I think everyone really enjoyed this, and it was a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about what else is going around in other types of libraries and other ways that we all can collaborate. I'm just going to put a reminder out to our attendees that we do have 2 additional sessions this afternoon, and we wrap up with 2 workshops today. So I see. How close is this to Maritime? We do have a SUNYLA conference at Maritime in 2023. So that could be a fun field trip. I'm just checking the chat to make sure I haven't missed anything. All right, and I'm not seeing anything. So I just, again, want to say thank you so much to Rebecca and Nicole for joining us today and sharing your work. Oh, I see. Is there any option to try and regrow any of the extinct species?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There have been studies to to see if germination rates for different types of plants. I don't know if you've seen, about a month and a half ago in the news, there was a really interesting study through University of Michigan that's been going on for 125 years, where a botanist 125 years ago buried seeds in the ground, and every 10 years they take some of them out to see if that they'll still germinate. And there, interestingly, are a few that have. But it really depends on the plant species and you know, the way that they've been preserved. There have been studies similar to that, specifically with herbarium specimens, and it's a pretty low percentage of things that could possibly even germinate. So, you know, they'd have to do some studies specifically on those extinct species. I should mention, I didn't mention at all, another use of our herbarium specimens in general is you can actually take a small sample off of a herbarium specimen and sequence DNA out of it. So many researchers, they might not be able to completely reassemble the entire genome of an extinct species, but they can still learn quite a bit from different portions of those individual genes.
That's very interesting. And Samantha just shared a couple of links on a few of the projects or the exhibits that have digital exhibits. So those are in the chat now as well. All right, well, thank you all so much. And the next sessions are scheduled to start at 1 o'clock. So you'll move on to the rooms or stay in this room for teaching library instruction. So again, thank you so much, Nicole and Samantha.
Thank you for having us. Bye, everyone.